really matters. So the way that we argue, we make statements, we state our premises, and we follow through to conclusion, this matters. And so we start with our premises, which we assume to be true, and we end with a conclusion. But what happens in a valid argument is that you state your premises and then you draw your conclusion. And what's happening is you're stating that those premises are facts, right? Doesn't matter if it's fake news. If you assume it's true and you draw a conclusion, that can be a valid argument form. And sometimes people will vehemently hold to their conclusion. And the reason that they're wrong and the reason that they struggle is the fact that they have assumed that their premises are true. And the conclusion does follow. Every once in a while, if you hear somebody that's having a really hard time and sticking to their guns at their conclusion, it might be that arguing about the conclusion doesn't help anything, because it's the fact that their premises are out of order that it matters. So this is the form that we try to embody like a valid argument. If we assume the premises are true and the conclusion then must be true, then the argument form is valid. Okay. So how do we check that? Well, truth tables. But a truth table can get very complicated quite quickly. So if this is the number of propositions, then the number of rows grows, right? If I have 2, I need 2 rows in my truth table. If I have 3 propositions, then I need 8 rows. If I have 10, I need over 1,000. And if I have 20, I'm now over 1,000,000. And so we mentioned this before, but truth tables get really complicated very quickly. Here's an important piece. Once we've identified a valid argument form, if it's valid, it's always valid. Okay? So now we have a form to our argument that we can recognize, right? We know this form, P implies Q, P, therefore Q. That's the form that we've seen so far. Remember that. And here I have another argument for you. If you are in computer science, then you will require logic. You are in computer science. Therefore, you will require logic. Is this a valid argument? And now you can disagree with the premises, that's up to you, but do you agree that this is a valid argument? Yes. So we can then have valid argument forms. And once we understand all the valid argument forms, it gives us a way to draw conclusions. So we have these premises, and there can be more than 2. There might only be 1. And from that, we're going to draw conclusions. So these are just compound propositions for now. And then we have some conclusion Q, right? And we don't know what they are. I haven't defined it, but they're compound propositions, all of them. That is as well. And this is valid as long as this holds. So remember that implication means that if this is true, then this must also be true. If this is false, what happens? It could be true. So if this is false, we don't know, because it doesn't say anything. Remember that implication tells us that if the first part is true, the second must be true. But if it's false, it tells us nothing. So if I say, for instance, if it is raining, then it is cloudy. That statement, if true, right? If it is raining, then it better be cloudy. Or my statement is, is not out of order. However, what does that statement, if it is raining, then it is cloudy. If it's not raining, what does that statement tell you? It tells you nothing. And so this implication, when this is false, we don't know what is true of the conclusion. But it doesn't matter, because nobody argues false premises. You assume the premise is true, and then you find a conclusion that follows. So that's okay. Okay. So valid arguments are always valid, right? They remain valid. But they're only true if the premises are true. So if it is Monday, then we have a tutorial. So there's a difference between truth values and whether or not an argument form is valid. So we have these premises. If it is Monday, then we have a tutorial. Assuming you're in tutorial 1 or 2. It is Monday, therefore we have a tutorial. So if these are both true, if the premises are true, then this holds, right? This is the same valid argument. This looks like P implies Q. This looks like P, where it is Monday, that's our P. We have a tutorial is our Q. And then we say therefore, so this is our therefore Q. We would put our line here. P implies Q and P are our premises. Therefore Q is our conclusion. So the question is this conclusion true? What's a truth value? We agree it's a valid argument, but is it true? I'll point you to October 12th. Let's say it is October 12th. It's a good reminder for people about this date coming up, especially if you're not in Canada right now. So October 12th is a Monday. Happens to be a Thanksgiving holiday, which makes this premise false. So not all Mondays, we don't have a tutorial every Monday. And so as a good reminder, on October 12th, that is a Monday. And so we don't have a tutorial on that day. But this doesn't actually change, give us a proper outcome. What happens is, if this is false, this whole argument fails, right? Because we assumed that it was true. And so we can't make claims. It is valid exactly when this holds, okay? But a valid argument looks like this. It's a bunch of premises imply a conclusion. Imply only holds when the first part is true. This will tell us the conclusion is true. When these are false, when any of these are false, any of the premises are false, all of a sudden we know nothing about the conclusion. That's when we get to that big question mark on the right. Okay, so it could be true. It's possible we have a class if that premise doesn't hold. But it's also possible, as in the case on October 12th, that we don't. Okay, so reminder, put it in your calendar, don't show up on class on October 12th. So it can be a valid argument, but in this example, it's not true. So validity and truth value are very different things, okay? This is the idea of a false premise. And there are some dangers of a false premise because, just as some examples in the debate last night, validity of an argument follows from argument form. So it can seem as if what you're stating makes sense because I assume these facts to be true and my conclusion follows. But what if one of the premises is false? Now the conclusion doesn't follow. It might be true, but we cannot conclude that the conclusion is true because we don't have facts that lead us in that direction. And so this is why we need rules of inference.